So I'm Emma Harrington. I'm the National Volunteering Manager at Canal and River Trust.
I'm Francesca. I'm one of the volunteering development coordinators at the Canal River Trust as well.
So thank you for joining us today. We're just going to get the slides up so you can see. So we're going to start from the beginning. Right, hello. And there we go. So
you can see that there's
So there we go. So just to give you a quick introduction, as we want to share with you the journey that we've been on and the step that we're taking to innovate volunteering at the Canal and River Trust, and just to kind of pose that question about, have you ever been volunteering yourself and your audience wasn't quite engaged? It can be quite daunting. So what exactly, this is the chance, this is the way innovation can come in, as innovation is all about finding new ways to inspire, to connect, and to have that impact. In volunteering, as in many areas, innovation can transform small moments into very powerful opportunities. So here's a summary of what we want to cover this morning in this session. So we're going to look at some challenges in volunteering innovation and just have a quick look at barriers. We'll have a poll, which we're looking for your interaction and input into. We've got a session about the solutions and changes that we've made to address some of the challenges we've faced at the Trust. We've got a session talking about the engagement, our volunteer engagement, our annual survey, and then some feedback about how we deal with our annual survey. And then just to summarise, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Excuse me. Just start off with a brief introduction into our charities, just so you can understand where we're coming from and the perspective of what we are going to talk about. So the Canal River Trust, we are a national charity. It's the UK's largest charity whose focus is on canals and navigable rivers. As you can see from our map here on the right, to give you a perspective of, we cover many aspects of England and Wales. We were formed in 2012, and many of you may be aware that previous to Canal and River Trust, we were the British Waterways Organisation, which was... So we formed as a charity in 2012, and prior to that, we had 50 volunteers in the organisation helping and assisting. And where we are now, which we're really proud of, and really this is where we're here, is we've got 5,000 volunteers. We've worked really hard, we've got really consistency. The motivation, one of our motivations to be where we're at the moment, is that we have this wonderful network of connections of rural, of urban, as you can see from the blue lines, which is our network across the country and Wales. So we have that connection. We need to engage volunteers to help us on this journey. We're in the situation where we have the major challenge, as I'm sure many organisations here have also, is financially. So we have a slowly decreasing grant from government, and we see as a sustainable way forward is having the input, the support of volunteers on our network. So we want to, we can offer the opportunity to get involved in various opportunities. You can be out on the towpath, out the network, on the bankside, as our volunteers here are showing you in this photograph, or we also opportunities desk-based, home-based, IT support, social media. So we've got that multiple layer of opportunities that we can offer to volunteers. So Francesca and myself, we're part of a newish formed team, which was formed to look at volunteering, to drive volunteering with consistency and make sure that we are connecting across all our colleagues and volunteers across this wonderful network that you can see in front of us. The key thing here is about having commonality about what we do. And it's just worth noting in this intro that actually our colleagues who work with volunteers, they do this as part of what they do. It's not necessarily their sole responsibility, and we call these our task managers. So we have a variety of task manager roles across the trust. So moving down. So just launching straight into a poll, we'd like to ask you, so if you set the scene, so if we set the scene as in you're introducing change in your volunteer management, can you let us know in the poll that Jenny will be sharing, can you let us know of these 4 options, which one do you find is a barrier when trying to introduce innovation and influence the change to your systems and processes in your organisation? There's 4 options. Do please choose one of them. So it's colleagues. Do you have colleagues who resist working with volunteers? Do you have the support of senior leadership? Do you have technical barriers, or is limited resources something? So I can see the numbers coming in. We've got the grey box might have appeared on top of the screen there. It's just a little glitch
We've
in
been
Zoom.
haunted by this grey box
Yes,
all
I'll
day.
move it to the side so you can see the bottom four, but oh,
Oh no. Oh, it's gone.
I think we need to move it at me.
I think we've got and we've got 92%. I think maybe the remaining percent might be myself. So I'm going to end the poll now and then share those results.
Yeah. So we've got 24%, 13%, 11, and 53. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Sorry, just thank you for sharing. That's really helps us understand kind of the backgrounds that everyone's coming from here. And some of these we can definitely relate to. This is where we have been developing our own processes and systems.
No problem. I'm just going to stop sharing, but just to flag that your screen has there's a huge grey block now over the entire screen share. So hopefully that will disappear when I there we go. It's gone.
I think that was the poll that we were looking at. So thank you. Yeah, that's gone then. So, okay. Thank you for sharing that. There's definitely areas here that there's a synergy between where we've been at as well. And one of the first things that we did to look at was actually we wanted to do a restart. We did a reevaluation of our volunteer strategy itself. We co-created this across the organisation. We had focus groups, we had volunteers, colleagues all coming together, looking at different topics in focus groups to co-create where we're at now. And these are definitely issues. The technical barriers one, that's half of everybody here in the poll. That was the biggest response here. Definitely IT, access to digital platforms. And we've had similar things where this is something we've been trying to consider as we've moved forward in developing our strategy. I just want to go down to the next slide where this is a visual, sorry, does it move down? Because in the co-creation of our strategy, we wanted to create something that was visual. We need something to be accessible to all. What we were trying to avoid was actually having a document of text, something that's in a file somewhere that people don't refer to. It just sits there and no one understands it. We created this and it has the 3 pillars. Obviously, there's a reflection of the waterways in here as well. And our 3 pillars that we work on and everything that we do in our national volunteering team. So we have the our welcome, the collaboration, and the supporting volunteering. I do appreciate some of the words might be small on your screen that you're looking at, but I'm aware that you'll be sent this pack after the conference today, so you can have a better look at what it is. But basically, all the arrows coming off here and leading into the waterways are all the subjects and topics that affect the volunteering within our trust. Everything from I&D, so inclusion, diversity, building relationships, recognition, so all topics I think you'll appreciate in the volunteering world. So I'm going to hand on to Francesca as she is going to look at some more details. There we go.
Thanks. Hi everybody. So I was going to talk to you about 3 big developments that we've made as a national volunteering team to tackle some of the challenges that we face as an organisation, how we can sort of improve and innovate and develop volunteering. Those 3 choices, 4 choices even in the poll, are something that I feel like if we could tick every single box, we probably all would. And they've felt very sort of relatable challenges there. So some of the things that we have put in place in order to tackle some of these barriers. The first thing I want to talk about was our subject matter expertise groups. So highlighting the creation of these groups at the Trust. So these are groups that are all about making sure everybody at the Trust has access to the same information and support no matter where they are, and also about building our in-house expertise to focus on key areas like safety and inclusion and diversity and marketing and recruitment and recognition. Before we became a national team, as Emma mentioned there relatively recently, our 10 volunteering development coordinators like myself worked regionally. So back then, a lot of what we did was focus quite locally, often meant that we were sort of ended up duplicating work or having quite different results across different areas of the Trust. So moving to a national approach took some adjustment, but it's really improved how we support the Trust volunteering programme. We still keep our local relationships, but now that we can sort of tap into the knowledge of a whole team, and in particular with these subject matter expertise groups, this means that we can offer a consistent and high quality service to everybody, every volunteer task manager, no matter where they're based or what team they're in. So what's great about this setup is that in our team, everyone can focus on their chosen area of expertise and dedicate the time needed to really develop it, at the same time knowing that the other areas of importance are being given the same attention. And so this has helped avoid us as a team avoid wasting time or duplicating efforts, and ensuring that we're solving problems like efficiently and consistently. And this way we're improving the volunteer experience as a whole without feeling sort of too stretched in too many directions. Another thing I wanted to talk about, which is a huge benefit of working like this, is how much it supports personal development. So having a chance to sort of specialise in your chosen area that you're passionate about has been rewarding, and I can testament to the fact that I've learned a lot. And so on the slide in front of you, as well as some nice pictures, is also a bit of a snapshot of our intranet. And so this shows the different sort of topic areas that we've been working on, with links to resources and contact details for extra help. This is designed as a quick and easy help yourself space, making it simple for everybody to find sort of what they need quite quickly, and not having an information overload, just sort of quite clear, sort of simple instructions. Okay, can we move on to the next one? Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was the work that we've done in supporting our volunteering task managers. So as Emma mentioned, these are our colleagues who work directly with our volunteers at the Trust. So every volunteer has a dedicated task manager who acts as the main point of contact and works closely with them throughout their volunteering experience. Our focus has been to develop these task managers to take ownership of their volunteering programs. We want them to feel empowered to shape their volunteering networks, to decide what activities make sense for their teams, and to explore new ways of working. Also, we've been trying to increasing awareness of what volunteers can bring to the table through case studies and pilot programs, and sharing successes as well. We're encouraging teams to really think creatively about how volunteers' skills and motivations can really add value to their work. So we've been creating some resources for supporting our volunteer task managers in the form of clear, easy to follow guidance. So straightforward resources on how to effectively manage your volunteers and run a successful program. Which you can see on the slide there in front of you. There are task manager, role of task manager, and supporting a task manager in your team, these kind of little handbooks here. We've also outlined the essential responsibilities of a volunteer manager, so with step-by-step advice on how to meet these, and setting some standards as well. So standards for communication, for recognition, and also inclusion. So these are the minimum requirements that anybody managing volunteers has to adhere to, to ensure that all our volunteers have a positive experience, and it's a consistent positive experience throughout our organisation. As I mentioned, we've kept this guidance as simple and as focused as possible, trying to make it easy for task managers to follow it and apply it. It's designed like a handbook, something practical and accessible, so that everybody gets the same information. As well as all of the digital resources that you can see there in front of you, we also offer support. So in other ways. So we've got our monthly task manager calls. So that's an online call where we share key information and updates and things like that. We've got a lot of guidance on using our new volunteer management system, Assemble, which we'll talk a bit more about in a bit. And of course, our one-to-one support from the dedicated volunteering development coordinators for your team. And so the overall goal is to make it as easy as possible for task managers to support their volunteers, whilst encouraging them to explore new ideas and build a great volunteering experience within their teams. And finally, I'm going to talk about streamlining our volunteering roles. So when we introduced Assemble, our new volunteer management system, which is a big change, we took the opportunity to sort of realign and refresh some of our volunteering roles. So over time, as we've really opened up volunteering to different teams and different activities, we ended up with over 800 different opportunities that volunteers could get involved with, many of which were getting incredibly niche. So it became clear that this approach wasn't quite working. So we decided to take stock of everything that a volunteer could do at the trust and streamline all of these 800 different opportunities into 15 distinct roles. As you can imagine, that was quite a task, but we did this by training and access requirements and needs. And so this change has made it clearer and more efficient for volunteers to be able to get involved with us. So now a volunteer can take part in a variety of activities under one single role, making it easier for them to move between teams and tasks, knowing that they already have all of the training and the access and support that they need in order to complete it. For those volunteers who want to get involved in multiple different activities, this has been a game changer, as they no longer have to go through the kind of rigmarole of signing up for a specific activity every time they want to do something else. And so this made volunteering much more accessible and flexible throughout our organisation. So with that, that's the end of my monologue. Sorry, a lot of information there, but we can go back to a bit of it later on in the presentation. I'm going to hand you back to Emma, who's going to share a bit more about how we're gathering our feedback from these changes that we've made from our volunteers.
Super, thank you, Francesca. I'm just changing the screen's not changed. I'm going to go down a slide. There we go. So this slide here now shows you the results of last year's survey that we ran. So we run an annual volunteer engagement survey online, and we've only just got the results back from our one, which was run this autumn. We've got the headline data at the moment, but I wanted to share that we produce this very visual summary, and we share this across the trust, across volunteers and networks, all the way we communicate with volunteers, as well as to our colleagues as well. So we're really pleased at the moment because the top line data we've got at the moment is, you can see here, last year we had 29% of our volunteers participate. This year we've had 37% respond, which we are massively pleased with. And our engagement score, which last year was 8.1, has also increased to 8.5. So we are thinking this is testament to everything that we've been doing as a team, connecting with across the trust with all our colleagues and volunteers. We haven't got the data crunched yet. We're really looking forward to seeing what is actually going to come out the other side of that. But what's key to share here is that we are evolving our system as well. So for the last 2 years, we've run this survey annually. Prior to that, we were running it twice a year. So that meant every 6 months, we'd be leading into another engagement survey, and we were feeling rushed. I don't think we were getting around to responding efficiently enough and having the proper impact that we should have had with a volunteer survey. I'm sure if a volunteer was taking part every 6 months, they would be commenting that they're not seeing the results of what they're commenting on. They're not seeing the impact. Why would you bother taking part in a survey again when you haven't seen the results or any impact from 6 months ago? So we've taken that on board, and this annual survey, I think we've got time now, and the key parts of what we'll summarise in a minute is actually how we communicate it and what we do with the survey results that we get back. So what we want to do now is actually we want to hear from you. We've got some breakout rooms planned now, and we are keen that you take time to chat and learn. This is the second time we've run this session this morning, and it's a great opportunity to share your situation and kind of sharing those top tips. We've even taken some ideas back from what we heard in the first session this morning as well. So what we'd like you to do, and Jenny will sort you into breakout rooms, is that we'd like you to think about this in 2 scenarios. So if you're in a group 1, this is where I'd like you to imagine the scenario that you work for an organisation that does run a formal engagement survey for your volunteers. We'd like you to consider what you find are the benefits to this process and what you do with those results as well. And then group 2, we'd like you to take a different angle and think about the scenario where the leadership in your organisation does not feel a need to have a formal survey for your volunteers. So therefore, can you tell us, or can you talk about what ideas you can suggest as different ways to gather feedback from your volunteers in your organisation? talk about why is this beneficial and how feedback can benefit your organisation. So over to you, Jenny. And I think those two groups, the titles there, the details will be put into your chat as you go into the breakout rooms as well. As you go into the groups, please can you nominate a spokesperson who can take notes and feedback, as we'd like to take time after the breakout room to hear back from each group so we can, kind of share notes and assess before we move on. Thank you, Jenny. Over to you to the breakout rooms.
Welcome back, everybody. So I hope that was some interesting conversations in your groups there. We've now got a little bit of time to share some of the sort of conversations you were having. So if we could hear from the spokesperson from Group 1A, if you know who you are.
I think it's me. Apologies if I'm jumping in the wrong one. So basically, we sort of looked at the survey. I started at IWM. We do one every year. The last one sort of shared that we got a 60% response rate, and we're sort of finding out sort of volunteers' motivations as to why they volunteer. A couple of the questions to give examples, do they feel trusted to carry out their role? We got 92% using their skills and experience in their role, 86. And why? So why do they want to come? Is it meeting new people, learning new skills? But the thing I shared, I found that this year, very much so, most of our volunteers are male and of retirement age, is they were talking about volunteering makes them socially visible and their mental health and loneliness. And it was the first time this year that you sort of identified that there was an issue there. And that I found really helpful because we can use that moving forward. And then we went sort of around the room, Royal Exchange, they had a 50% return rate on theirs. They found with their volunteers, it's because they wanted to learn more, not necessarily social skills, and sort of have a niche specialist subject to do with the theatre. And they focused on how volunteers felt welcomed by staff and they wanted more tasks and to sort of be more active. Jess said when she started, their first survey was quite negative, which is why she was employed. But as they've done a few more, working out the sort of motivations as to why volunteers want to volunteer there, with a lot of sort of multi-choice questions discussing training and recruitment, and then creating sort of word clouds to see the trends so that it's very easy to have an overhead view. Also covering what we can and can't do for volunteers, which is sometimes difficult. We get it here, loads of ideas, just it's a great suggestion, but the reason we can't and the transparency behind why we can't. Rachel said out of theirs, they got volunteers wanting to feel part of the organisation and wanting to experience sort of more integration and more comms and to sort of feel part of it more. Also, what a lot of volunteers wanting to move into paid roles, using it as a stepping stone, which I think a lot of people obviously in volunteering doing, but putting on workshops and CVs and sort of helping that to happen as well, which I think is lovely. Wendy gave details of when she was at the Beamish Museum, which was her last one. She said they put out a November survey and also asked for updates on information like next of kin, but especially EDI, which I know is something here we're trying to collect more information on. But I liked her. They were very clever. So they linked filling out the survey to getting the renewal of your volunteer pass. So if you didn't do it, your pass didn't get renewed, and they had a 90% return. So I might be stealing that for my next one. But I think we all just sort of said we found it really interesting to sort of get a bigger overview as to what the drivers are and what they're trying to get out of it. But no, that was kind of it for us. It was very interesting.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Yeah, really lovely to hear the sort of summary of that conversation there. For the interest of time, I'm just going to ask Group 1B to share, and then if there's sort of similar themes, we can kind of discuss them all at once. So Group 1B, have you got?
I think that's me. So we talked about quite a few different things. I think things to draw away in terms of like the benefits. Frankly, it's just the opportunity to see what you are doing right. It's very easy to look at the negativity and look at the things that need to change, but just be able to identify those fixed things that are correct. But also using that data to identify sort of key areas where you need to do that growth or development, whether it's a particular role or area, whether it's say like your like remote groups need more support, things like that. This is one I really liked, which was that it's nice to have that sort of that actual human connection with your volunteers, so be able to potentially get qualitative data back as well as quantitative data. So hearing like directly from volunteers, potentially quotes, things like that that you could potentially use. Um, within the survey we use at our charity, we do have a bit where volunteers can provide their name if they want a response, but providing that like anonymous background if people want it, so people can say what they want with freedom, but equally, if people want to have a response or about a specific thing, they can have that direct one, which I know is a bit time reliant depending on what you can't do with your organization.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Group 1A and B. Lots of really interesting feedback there, I think, obviously talking around the volunteer experience and motivation and access and the benefits in the survey, having all of that data in one place, being able to sort of pick out, like you say, things that are going really well and focus on changing the things that perhaps need that attention. Really great, and I hope that you found those discussions within your groups helpful. Is there anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I think there's something that came up in the other groups as well. You've mentioned it here. It's the incentive, somehow having that incentive to get involved in a survey. It can have that effect. I know some organisations won't always necessarily want to be using that, but actually, even the results you're getting back there as well, I think, to be able to use them, to be able to know that, you know, mental health and loneliness is a major kind of driver for people volunteering, that in itself helps us, you know, whichever organisation that was, you know, I'm sure there's similarity with other ones. We have that issue, you know, that same kind of results. It's actually, well, that's definitely something we can use to promote health and well-being. How can we support our volunteers to do more of this? I did actually meet some volunteers on the network recently. I was out in an area and the volunteers there said this one time when they're out on the bank side, that's one time in a week where they see people and they have that interaction, socialness. So that was really profound to me. I came away quite stunned by that. And I think that's probably the same thing with a lot of volunteering in a certain age group. So actually understanding that so we can react to that, I think, is really important as organisations and volunteer managers. Thank you for that. That's really helpful to see that. And using the quotes, I think, is helpful as well. It is that qualitative data and having the time to review it is really key, isn't it? Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so next we've got Group 2A. Have you got your spokesperson?
I don't know if I was 2A or B in that group, but I can certainly jump in. Apologies if I'm jumping over anyone else. So our group was talking about sort of when there's not a formal survey. We found that quite a few of us did have the survey, but we still used other ways to gather sort of informal data from volunteers. So some of the things that we were talking about were things like volunteer forums in person or focused feedback groups or workshops, and the in-person element was really important for that. Partially because it meant that whilst you were using them to gather data, you were also using them as a social opportunity for volunteers whose like shifts might not overlap, for example. Coffee mornings was something else, a bit more of a casual way of gathering feedback. Catch-ups, like one-to-ones, but there was an acknowledgement that sometimes that is challenging when you've got a really big sort of volunteer group of 400 people. There were comment boxes that someone was talking about, casual encounters, so going out and seeing the volunteers like on post and having a chat to them, asking how the day is going, you know, could they use any support or they have any sort of anything they want to feedback. We also talked a little bit about the value of volunteer management systems for those organisations who are lucky enough to have them. So two of us had Assemble, and one person brought up logging on to Assemble, being able to see, like, track volunteer actions on that. So even something as simple as sort of like what news stories are popular, so what sort of topics are capturing people's attention, tracking who is turning up to shifts. What can we actually learn through watching what the volunteers are doing, how are they responding? And we talked also just about sort of smaller questionnaires as well, outside of sort of the big sort of engagement surveys. We didn't so much get onto benefits, but I think there was definitely a feeling that getting feedback was really beneficial, but there were some challenges in terms of the best way to disseminate that, and also particularly getting actions from that. So someone was talking about, like, sometimes it's much easier for them to take action at a more local level than perhaps to affect change higher up, but they can still get some successes through those like smaller local actions.
Great, thank you so much. Really comprehensive summary there. That's great. So let's go to group 2B, and then we can chat at the end of that, because there might be some similar themes that come up. So I don't know if there's a spokesperson from group 2B.
I think we might have forgotten to nominate a spokesperson.
I feel like you've nominated yourself.
Right, I know, that's what I'm thinking. That's fine. We also spoke about the volunteer management system. I think it's yeah, Chris, who uses Better Impact, and that a survey pops up at the end of a volunteer's shift, so they're able to get a real snapshot there of how that went for the volunteer. If I think the volunteer can give a satisfaction rate, then if it's below a certain score, then that instantly prompts the volunteer coordinator to check in with that volunteer. There's also a nice feature where the volunteer gets asked if they got any particular questions from visitors. So again, if that's something, that's information that they're picking up on, and then they can provide an answer to that question, but circulate it to all the volunteers who are in that role, so that that information is reaching more people. We also spoke about having I think it's Victoria was talking about possibly starting in the future a drop-in clinic, which is, so I get the impression Victoria's not supporting volunteers directly, but is more in a kind of policies development role for volunteers, so allowing that time to check in with volunteers about developments with the volunteering programme. And Katerina at the V&A has a spreadsheet which staff can populate. So I suppose that's more for us to be observing. If we observe a volunteer engaging in a particular way, that this is recorded, which is something that I was talking about as well, and how we I work for quite a small organisation, so this is much easier, but to be noting where volunteers engaging in a particular way, and I also think it's important to identify what we mean by engagement as well. For us, if I see volunteers coming to events with their volunteering, for me that's a sign that they are really engaged in the organisation, but they're not volunteering, but they're showing their interest in the organisation. So yeah, identifying on an individual basis what does engagement look like, and then observing whether or not that's happening.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a bit of a jumble of what we discussed.
No, thank you, Gabrielle, for jumping in for your group. That's really, really appreciated. Thank you. Or did you want to?
Yeah, no, just really great to hear all of that summaries of those discussions there. I think that again, that more sort of casual element of gathering feedback, whether it's through, you mentioned their coffee mornings and that sort of in-person sort of conversational feedback often goes a long way as well, and that face-to-face element, helping people feel heard. There's also the sort of benefits of that being less expensive. Obviously, a big annual survey potentially run by a third party has a resource behind it. And so hearing all of the other methods to use to gather feedback, particularly on a sort of one-to-one face-to-face level, really, really interesting there. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's helpful. I think hopefully you've all learned kind of some ideas and got some top tips from hearing and discussing with others in your breakout group. I think there's a whole range of ways to do this, aren't there? From, I think, the volunteer forums, the face-to-face. Do find that face-to-face communication is just that more impactful, isn't it? And it also assists that value that a volunteer will feel that they're being chance to talk, chance to be heard, and chance to be listened to, and chance to ask questions as well, isn't it? Especially, I think we've got this kind of, we've got the bigger barriers of being in a large organisation. So we do have this annual survey But I think there's so many other ways out there that make a benefit to show that we want to have feedback. Okay. Was there any other feedback from the groups? Is there any other comments a moment before we move on
I think
to?
there was one that popped up in the chat. I think somebody said about debriefing. I didn't read it properly as it came up, but there was also a comment that group B2B made about gathering feedback after one specific debriefing at the end of each volunteering session.
That's nice.
Yeah, which is again is sort of like a continuous sort of thing, isn't it? It's not like every year there's this whole thing that happens, but it's sort of continuously temperature checking how people are feeling and you know how sessions are running and such.
Brilliant. Okay, in that case then, let's move down to the next slide, because I'm conscious that we want to make sure we've got some time to have some questions as well, time for Q&A. So we are currently waiting for the insights, as I've said previously, and we are evolving our process. You know, everything we've been saying here today, there's always ways to learn, aren't there? But if I just kind of summarize the steps that we take when we do get our survey back, we do start with that top line announcements via our chief exec. So we've just had that sent out to all our staff, all our volunteers. Everybody has seen the top level data that we've got back and know that there's more to come. The analysis is really important to us, and it gets cascaded through. Our regional directors and our team leaders will be the first ones to get the data, and we'll analyze it and look at the insights, and we'll action from that. And some of the things that were said, I think especially by group 2 as well, we do that kind of approach as well. We will set up volunteer forums. We have online meetings. So we make online meetings at accessible times in the week and the day, not necessarily at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when, you know, volunteers may not be available, but we'll run the same session a couple of times through a week so that people have a chance to hear, and we'll have that visual data. We'll share the numbers, the data. And what we are finding is really important, and it's vital. We don't just talk about the successes and the high numbers. What's vital is to address the challenging and the lower scoring questions. These are important for other colleagues to understand as well. So we're not hiding behind glass and mirrors. What's the phrase? Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
We want everyone to understand what the challenges are as well. So it's wonderful to have the success stories that, you know, promote what we're proud of, but on the same hand, we want to look at the challenges and make sure we are action planning and making sure that everybody's thoughts have been read and the participation is worth their time as well. So that's really, really important to us. We also, throughout the year, we ask for extra feedback as well. We've just had our annual volunteer awards, and we've had fantastic feedback, a lot of feedback about the evaluation of that. Sorry, about how the awards system went. We need to make sure, you know, the award process is for our volunteers. We need to make sure it's kind of, you know, it's achieving everything that we want it to achieve. But also, again, forums, we call them Cuppa and Connects. So we have informal times to get together in teams, similar to that way about saying thank you after a volunteering event, time to catch up, time to give that face-to-face a time to chat and learn and listen, really. I think actually what I wanted to say, Jenny, could you go to the next slide, please? So all I wanted to say on this one was actually we just wanted to just summarize everything that we've covered today. We've called it our little toolbox, and so these are the 6 areas that we've covered across our presentation today, and this hour has absolutely flown by. But we started off with the establishment of us as a new team to look at and become consistent across our trust. We've had the luxury of doing that, and it's been brilliant, and it's been so formative to actually make sure we've got consistency. This co-creation of our volunteer strategy, making sure it's accessible and visible. It also reset everything, so everyone was a part of that. The expertise in our subjects has been enormously helpful, making sure that we're not doubling up efforts, and there's people know who to get help from about I&D or health and safety. Those handbooks have been brilliant as well, so they're accessible formats on our intranet, and we share documentation on our volunteer management system as well. Revision of our volunteer engagement survey, like I said, we're still evolving this, we're still trying to learn, And of course, we had the luxury and the effort of introducing a new volunteer management system. We only started with Assemble on the 1st of April this year. So we're still getting used to it, but it has been brilliant as well. So we've had that kind of introduced as well. That's all I wanted to summarise today and actually talk about. On our last slide, we've got our contact details, so we can put that up. But Jenny, are there questions that we can respond to now?
Yes, so we've got a question that came up earlier around your intranet for staff, whether it was intranet for staff and volunteers.
Yeah.
So
it's so yeah, it's our colleague and our lead volunteers have access to our intranet, but we also put all of the information, like our handbooks and stuff, that are relevant for volunteers in the document hub on Assemble, so they have access to all of the relevant information through their Assemble account.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Emma and Francesca? Gabrielle?
Thank you both so much for preparing this presentation and sharing, yeah, all you've been working on. I was wondering about surveys. This is quite maybe a specific question, but when people score a lower score, how do you know why they're giving you that lower score? I mean, I think there's like concerns about making sure that people are honest, so therefore you want the surveys to be anonymous. So if people give specific examples, it may identify them. But yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about how that works, because I find it very frustrating if someone gives a lower score, but I'm like, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, the solution that I might propose to resolving that is still a bit like a stab in the dark.
Okay, so yes, we're the same. Thank you, Gabrielle. That's interesting. Yeah, good question. We definitely were anonymous as well. And yes, sometimes you get this massive chart and you see these kind of, some lower numbers. Sometimes you have that qualitative, someone's written something as well, but that's not on every question that we kind of have that ability, that we kind of ask for that feedback. But this is where we find those couple and connects, those informal meetings are important, because at least then we can share what those low scoring questions were, what the results were. And so that person can still feel anonymous, can't they? And they're not being picked on or kind of, highlighted. But if it's brought up and if it's discussed, it brings it to light as well. So it's that opportunity, I think, in whatever way we do. We have our online meetings, and we encourage teams to have this face-to-face volunteer forums, workshops as well. That's a bit of advice. Anything else would you add to that, Francesca?
No, I think you've sort of summed that up quite nicely. It's a challenge to keep it anonymous, and then also to address if they're really specific concerns. I think the way that the questions are phrased in the engagement survey isn't to invite sort of really localized specific complaints particularly, and it's to kind of score an experience overall. And so if it's a low scoring, that's, obviously that's fine, and we can address it as a sort of as a slightly bigger topic, and it's sort of not quite open to like, well, this particular thing at my particular location. So it's more about the kind of the whole experience, and so it's half in the way it's designed, and then also offering other avenues in order to have that feedback and those conversations and that localized specific problem solving stuff that perhaps won't go into the survey like that. Does that make sense? Cool.
Perfect. We did have another hand up, but that hand has disappeared. But we are also out of time. So what I would say to the person that had their hand up, if your question may have been answered, but if it hasn't, and as you've put your hand down, please do contact Emma and Francesca using contact details here. You'll see in